7:08 in the morning. You're listening to Upfront. I'm Brian Edwards-Teekert. One of the most lasting marks any president makes on the government is on the judicial branch, where presidential appointees serve for life. That explains why Republican senators have so aggressively obstructed many of President Obama's judicial appointees, but it does not explain why Obama has been slow to make appointments, or why his appointments have been more heavily weighted towards federal former prosecutors than any previous president. Joining us to discuss the situation with the judicial branch is Nan Aron, who's president of the Alliance for Justice, which is a progressive group in Washington that monitors the judicial branch of government. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me this morning.
Start off by describing what the makeup of the federal judiciary is like right now. What are the overall politics?
Well, we've got, at the moment, there's something like 850 federal judges. District Court judges, Court of Appeals judges, and 9 Supreme Court justices. Of these numbers, we have at the moment a total of 107 vacancies, which is, if you think about the fact that there are only 850 seats, 107 vacancies is a pretty substantial number of seats that are unfilled now at the moment. The president is, as you stated earlier, was a little slow out of the gate in putting up names for these seats, but I'm pleased to say that he has accelerated the pace of nominations and indicated that he is going to make a priority of the judiciary over his second term, which is a good thing.
Now, you've run the numbers on the makeup of his appointees. This is, racially speaking, gender speaking, the most diverse group of federal judicial appointees ever put up by a president.
Yes, I would say that the hallmark of his judicial selection has been the large number of people of color and women who have become judges. For instance, more than 41% of his nominees have been women. That far exceeds any of his predecessors. And now on the Supreme Court, we have three women, including the president's 2 nominees of Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. In addition, there's also a much larger number of African Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans on the federal bench, all of which is a very positive development. I also should say that he's named some openly gay and lesbian candidates. Again, that's unprecedented. It's a new development, and that's all for the good as well.
Now, digging into your numbers, the San Francisco Chronicle's Bob Agelko came to the conclusion that they're much less diverse when it comes to their professional backgrounds. There's a higher proportion of former prosecutors in this round of judicial appointees than in any of the previous presidents you were able to look at.
That is true. Bob Agelko's article is very important in pointing out that, in fact, while the president has taken diversity into account, the one component of diversity that needs much greater attention during the second term is that of professional diversity. Expanding the number of public interest, civil rights, worker rights, public defenders, federal defenders. I may be leaving a category out or two, but nonetheless, it's important that we think of diversity also in terms of putting individuals on the federal bench who understand firsthand how the law affects everyday people. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at the work of a legal services lawyer, of a public defender lawyer, a federal defender, these lawyers understand firsthand what it's like to experience life at the margins. Public interest lawyers get to know people very well. You know, they take on a life when they're representing a client before the court. They know their clients. Oftentimes they know their families. They know the messiness of all of our lives, and all of that helps a lawyer understand how important it is to stand up for that individual in court. And that experience, those values, that life experience is very important.
Well, how predictive is the professional
federal bench?
How predictive is an attorney's lawyer's professional background of their performance as a judge, of the type of rulings they make?
That's a really good question. Let's take two examples. Let's look at Samuel Alito. Samuel Alito is known by your listeners. He was on the Supreme Court now. He was a prosecutor from 1977 to 1981. I can probably count on the fingers of one hand the instances where he didn't uphold a conviction, either when he was on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals or now on the Supreme Court. And it's interesting. I was speaking to a judge on one of the circuits in the country, and he was saying to me that when a criminal case is appealed to a circuit court of appeals, if he is on a panel with two former prosecutors, he was saying to me that almost inevitably those prosecutors will uphold a conviction. Now, it's not because they're more evil, it's because of their life experience. It's because of the cultural values that they bring to the process of judging and decision-making.
But by the same token, Sonia Sotomayor, who's firmly in the liberal wing of the Supreme Court, is a former prosecutor herself.
Yes, she is. But, you know, I seem to remember reading somewhere recently that Sonia Sotomayor, yes, who was a prosecutor, in fact, left the prosecutor's office to represent everyday people because she desired a different kind of life experience. And therefore, is it absolutely predictive? I can't say in each and every case, no. But generally speaking, I take the words of that Court of Appeals judge who told me that if there are prosecutors on the panel, that pretty much they're going to rule the same way, and that was to uphold conviction. So, and I'm not saying that prosecutors make bad judges. I would say just the opposite. All I'm saying is that it's important to think about professional diversity, that for every prosecutor that we name to a judicial vacancy, you know what, we need to put on a public defender or a legal services lawyer or an environmental lawyer, civil rights lawyer.
What are the stakes? How important is the federal judiciary?
What are the stakes? Oh, well, when you think about the federal judiciary, you have to think about that almost every aspect of our lives is determined by what a federal court decision says, from the air we breathe to the water we drink to how safe our workplaces are to whether an African American can get a promotion in a law firm or a corporation. So much of our daily life comes to what federal courts have ruled or said about how agencies or corporations have to operate. There's another piece to it also, and that is I see the federal courts as the forums and the only forums that an everyday person has to get their problem addressed. An everyday person has a hard time getting the attention of their member of Congress. They haven't if they don't know that member of Congress, if they haven't contributed money to his or her campaign, it's difficult to get inside the office of a local member and get a problem resolved. Same is true at the executive branch or with the gubernatorial level. The federal courts are there so that people at the margins, vulnerable people, people who have very serious problems in their lives, they've had their social security terminated, they've lost their home, they've been accused of a major drug problem. For most people, the federal courts are the only forum available where they're on an equal footing with the other side and have a shot at getting a federal judge to hear a case and make a decent ruling. And do I say that everyday person has to win 100% of the time? No.
So
but it's the only place where we get a shot.
Yeah, let's talk about the makeup of the bench right now. So
okay.
Everybody who holds a federal judgeship has been appointed by a politician of one party or the other. Although they are officially nonpartisan judges, their decisions in aggregate do tend to reflect the politics of the party that put them in office. How many are Republican versus Democratic appointees right now?
How many Republican versus Democrat appointees?
Mm-hmm.
There's still a majority of Republicans appointees on both the Circuit Court of Appeals as well as the district courts. Even though we've had 4 years of an Obama presidency, the fact of the matter is the majority is Republican appointed, and that is very important. It's important because Republican presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan, well known to your California listeners, and the two Bushes, appointed candidates to the federal bench in large part because they met certain criteria. They fulfilled the criteria of certain litmus tests. So most of Republican appointees to, let's say, the circuit courts were members of the Federal Society, a very conservative, exclusive club of lawyers. Most of them are anti-choice. Most of them are quite conservative on social issues that we confront in our court systems today. And most are, and I say this knowing how important this is, most of them tend to rule in favor of big business at the expense of everyday people. Republican presidents were very serious about their judge picking and followed very strict criteria in selecting who went on the federal bench. It's not the same. It's just not true of Democratic presidents. In fact, both Presidents Clinton and Obama have selected their candidates from law firms, again from prosecutorial offices, and put, I'd say, more moderate candidates on the federal bench.
And you've also pointed out in the numbers that your organization, the Alliance for Justice, has crunched that Republican presidents tend to appoint younger judges.
Oh, that's true. I forgot that. That's absolutely true. Republican judges tend to be much younger. I think something like 6 years, an average of 6 years younger than those appointed by Democratic presidents.
And of course they serve
and that's very intentional. It's intentional because Republican presidents are very aware, given that judges serve life tenure, that their judges will serve a long time on the federal bench. Look at former Chief Justice William Rehnquist. I think William Rehnquist served on the Supreme Court through the term of 7 different presidents. That's how powerful judges and justices are when you think about it. So this president knows and is fully aware that the judges and justices that he puts on now on the federal bench will serve much longer than he'll serve as president. His judges will be on the bench much, much longer. So judges and justices are very important.
Right. Well, on that note, I want to talk about
one other point.
Yeah.
I want to make one other point. I talked about the impact of prosecutors on the bench, but others have remarked. Look at the conversation that Thurgood Marshall imposed on the Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall came from that wonderful civil rights organization, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and from there went to the Supreme Court. The fact of the matter is he had an enormous impact on the Supreme Court, not just simply on the rulings issued by the court, but on the conversations, the conversations among the justices, the kinds of questions the justices asked the litigants who argued before the court. Think of Thurgood Marshall. When you think of professional diversity, here was a civil rights lawyer who really changed the conversation on the court. And I would say, he did it for an enhanced justice for all Americans in this country.
So that brings us around to the question of how the people Barack Obama has appointed are being treated. The last Senate session wrapped up with 11 of his federal judge appointees not even going to a confirmation vote in the Senate, which is not incredibly uncommon when a presidential election is coming up, because obviously the Republican minority was hoping to have one of their guys in the White House come January. But they didn't move on the judicial appointments even after the election was decided. What kind of signals are we getting about how they'll treat his appointments during this term?
Well, that's a good question. Two things. One is, we have seen an unprecedented level of obstructionism by Republicans. We've never seen, I've been working on this issue, for several decades. I've never seen a party filibuster judges who were approved by senators of that party. And yet we've got Republican senators filibustering candidates that Republican senators support. I've never seen that ever. In all the years that I've worked on judicial selection, that's number. And as a result of that high level of obstructionism, this president left his first term with more vacancies than existed when he began his first term. So obviously something has to change. Number two, I was heartened to see that Senator Reid and Senator McConnell enter into an agreement. It sure didn't go far enough, but the agreement is now going forward in the president's second term going to make it more difficult for Republican senators to filibuster district court nominees, and that's a good thing. The problem is, agreement didn't say anything about circuit court nominees, so I'm very worried about that. But I think with respect to district court nominees, and this is very important for California, which has a huge number of judicial vacancies, I think 7 at the moment, right, at the district court level. So I'm pleased to say that Republicans will have a few more roadblocks put in the path of their ability to obstruct, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, we're going to be looking for the Democratic senators to stand up and make judicial selection a priority. It's as important for them to be as aggressive as they can as it is for the White House. I don't want to suggest that this is just a White House playbook. It's incumbent on the senators as well to really make sure that as many of these seats are filled as possible with really good judges.
Here in the Bay Area, of course, there are 2 judges up, William Oreck III, who spent 4 years early in his career working as a lawyer for the poor in Georgia, and Troy Nunley, who grew up in San Francisco's Hunters Point neighborhood, low-income African-American neighborhood in southeast San Francisco. Neither of them got a vote during the last Senate session. Both of them have been renominated by President Obama during this session. How many nominees are up in the air right now?
Well, I should just say with respect to those 2 nominees, they are exemplary nominees, and we are looking forward to their confirmation. And I think people all need to be aware that we need to work with the California senators. We need to work with Senator Harry Reid, Majority Leader, to ensure that those 2 nominations are brought to a quick vote and that these 2 candidates get confirmed. You couldn't have 2 better candidates for these district court seats. You just couldn't. So that's got to be a priority for all of us and all of our listeners. We ought to be working with the senators to help make that happen. But we also have 2 circuit court openings on the Ninth Circuit, and the Ninth Circuit is critically important. It hears some of the most important cases in the country, and we'll be working with senators and the White House to ensure that those seats.
All right. Well, Nan Aron, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for asking me.
Nan Aron is president.
And I love your show.
Oh, thank you. Nan Aron is president of the Alliance for Justice. It's a progressive coalition in Washington.